Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of precision. It is almost like engineering or something. You break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, "There it is."
Right. It is binary. It is either broken or not broken. It is clean. And, we find a lot of comfort in that.
Yeah, exactly.
We inherently like things to be visible and easily categorized.
But then you step into the world of neurodevelopment or trauma or mood disorders, and suddenly that X-ray machine is completely useless. We find ourselves looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, well, honestly, it is incredibly murky.
Oh, it is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
And our mission today is to wade right into those muddy waters with you. We are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating stack of clinical notes and insights.
Yeah, these are provided by Coping and Healing Counseling.
Right, also known as CHC, which is a comprehensive telehealth therapy practice based in Georgia. What we're doing today is dismantling some deeply ingrained and frankly dangerous societal misconceptions about depression.
Definitely.
Specifically, we are targeting this insidious illusion of high-functioning depression. It is this pervasive idea out there that if you are still showing up to work, if you are, out there being productive and smiling at the grocery store, you can't possibly be struggling that much.
Which is so wrong. What these clinical notes offer is a rigorous, evidence-based look at just how profoundly we misunderstand mental health as a society.
Yeah.
And they really underscore the critical importance of proactive care. We have this collective blind spot. We measure a person's wellness almost entirely by their outward productivity rather than their internal stability.
Okay, let's unpack this. Starting with the assumption that holding down a job means you are mentally sound. You hear this narrative all the time. People say, oh, they are not depressed. They just closed a huge deal. Or, she is organizing the neighborhood block party. She is totally fine.
That outward execution of tasks is perhaps the most deceptive smokescreen clinicians encounter. The reality documented in these clinical notes is that a person can be completely capable of paying their bills on time. They can parent their kids with incredible patience, fulfill every single professional obligation, while simultaneously being entirely underwater inside.
Wow.
Right. The ability to perform a routine just does not negate the internal experience of drowning.
I noticed the sources highlighted some specific data on this using the PHQ-9 screening tool, which measures the severity of depressive symptoms. It really jumped out at me that patients scoring in the 10 to 14 range, which clinically indicates moderate depression, often correlate exactly with this demographic.
Exactly.
These are people working full-time, hitting their deadlines, but their internal resources are utterly depleted.
That 10 to 14 range is highly representative of this phenomenon. The cognitive load required to just keep up the facade of normalcy at work or at home is taking every last drop of energetic currency they possess.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
As a result, there is absolutely nothing left over in the tank for joy, for genuine connection, or for actual self-care.
It makes me think of a smartphone that is running on 1% battery. On the outside, the screen is still lit up. It is somehow still playing a high-definition video perfectly, responding to your taps.
Yeah, looking like it is performing exactly as it was designed to.
Right. But internally, the system is in total crisis mode. It has aggressively shut down all non-essential background functions. The processor is overheating, and it is literally moments away from just going completely black.
That visual captures the biological reality perfectly. The phone is prioritizing the immediate, visible output at the expense of systemic health.
But because that phone is still playing the video, because people physically get out of bed and answer their emails, society assumes the internal struggle is just a minor mindset issue. People look at a high-functioning individual and think, well, you just need to think positive. You are just in a funk.
As if depression is just a bad mood that you can manifest your way out of if you just try hard enough.
Right.
That assumption is entirely dismissive of the biological reality of the condition. The clinical data from our sources emphasizes that depression is deeply biological and neurological. It is not a lack of willpower.
No, not at all.
We are talking about literal alterations in brain chemistry. For instance, we see fundamental disruptions in sleep architecture. This means the way a person cycles through deep and REM sleep is physically broken.
Wait, literally broken?
Literally broken, leaving them chronically exhausted on a cellular level no matter how many hours they lie in bed.
That concept of broken sleep architecture completely shifts the perspective. It is not just, oh, I feel tired today. It is my brain's mechanical ability to repair itself at night has been physically compromised.
Exactly. And taking that a step further, their stress response systems, specifically the HPA axis, which controls cortisol and adrenaline, become profoundly dysregulated.
So they are constantly stressed.
Yes. Instead of a normal ebb and flow of stress hormones, they are trapped in a state of physiological hyperarousal. Imagine the physical sensation of a near-miss car accident.
Oh, that huge spike of adrenaline.
Right. But feeling a low-grade version of that constantly while just sitting at your desk, over time, that hyperarousal inevitably crashes into complete exhaustion. Furthermore, the reward circuits in the brain are fundamentally altered.
The dopamine pathways.
Precisely. The neural pathways that process dopamine and allow you to feel pleasure or satisfaction from a job well done.
This is exactly what drives me crazy about the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality. If depression is literally altering your sleep architecture and physically changing your brain's dopamine reward circuits, telling someone to just think positive is absurd.
It really is.
It is like pressing the gas pedal on a car when the transmission is completely disconnected. The engine is roaring, the effort is absolutely there, but mechanically the signal cannot reach the wheels.
Yes.
You cannot just outthink a broken transmission.
That is a much more accurate representation of the physiological block. And the danger of the think positive narrative is that it brings a tremendous amount of shame.
Oh, for sure.
The patient puts their foot on the gas, tries to think positive, fails because they are fighting a literal biological deficit, and then concludes that it is their own personal failing. Now, the clinical notes do emphasize that thoughts matter, but in a structured, clinical way.
Right, but CBT is entirely different from toxic positivity or just forcing a smile.
Completely different. CBT is not about pretending everything is great. It is an evidence-based tool for consciously identifying cognitive distortions.
Like those automatic negative assumptions the brain makes.
Exactly. And systematically rewiring those neural pathways over time. It requires real exertion to build new mental infrastructure. But the notes also stress that sometimes the biological barrier is so high that CBT alone cannot penetrate it. You need a baseline level of neurotransmitter function just to do the work of therapy.
Which naturally brings up the hesitation so many high-functioning people have around medication. There's this pervasive fear that antidepressants will change who you are.
Oh, constantly.
I think a lot of people surviving on that 1% battery think, look, I am miserable, but I am surviving. I do not want to take a pill and become a zombie or lose my professional edge.
What's fascinating here is that the clinical reality is almost exactly the opposite of that fear. While psychiatric medications absolutely require careful management by a professional, correctly matched medication does not flatten a person's personality.
Wait, really? It doesn't?
No, not when matched correctly. According to the clinical experience detailed in these notes, for many people, an antidepressant is the very thing that allows them to feel like themselves again for the first time in years.
Oh, wow. So it is not changing who they are. It is giving them access to who they are.
It lifts the fog that was obscuring their true personality. If your reward circuits are biologically suppressed, your sense of humor, your passions, your natural curiosities, those are all suppressed along with them.
That makes total sense.
The medication isn't creating a synthetic, artificially happy personality. It is repairing the biological bridge so your actual personality can finally cross back over.
Okay, so if we establish that depression is this severe biological condition, one that alters your brain chemistry, ruins your sleep architecture, and requires real interventions like structured therapy or medication, it is deeply alarming how long people wait to get help.
It is terrifying.
If you had a biological issue with your liver or a disconnected transmission in your car, you would go to the professional immediately. But with mental health, there is this cultural habit of waiting until the absolute wheels fall off.
That is the ultimate tragedy of the high-functioning illusion. People convince themselves that if they aren't in an active, life-threatening crisis, their pain isn't bad enough to warrant taking up a therapist's time.
Right. If they aren't completely bedridden, they think they shouldn't bother. I feel like we have all minimized our own struggles at some point, thinking, well, there are people out there with real visible problems. I shouldn't take up a spot on a therapist's couch just because I feel empty inside while doing my laundry.
That kind of minimizing is incredibly dangerous because depression is progressive. The clinical notes provide some hard data on why this wait-and-see approach is so flawed. Let's look back at that PHQ-9 screening tool.
The one we mentioned earlier.
Yes, it is a highly robust diagnostic instrument.
Yeah.
At a cutoff score of 10, It has 88% sensitivity and 88% specificity for identifying major depressive disorder.
I saw those percentages in the notes. And just to put that into plain English, with 88% sensitivity, it rarely misses someone who is genuinely struggling.
Exactly.
And with matching specificity, it is not going to throw false alarms. It is incredibly reliable.
It is highly reliable. When someone hits that score of 10, the clinical indicators are glaring. But the critical insight from the coping and healing counseling notes is what happens just below that line.
In the 5 to 9 range.
Yes. Patients scoring in the 5 to 9 range, which is categorized as mild depression, are frequently dismissed. Sometimes a primary care doctor might brush it off, but most often, patients dismiss themselves.
Oh, that is so true.
They see a score of 6 and think, I am fine. I just need to push harder at the gym.
They're looking at their screen, seeing it is still lit up,
Yeah.
and totally ignoring the 1% battery warning.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this 5 to 9 range is actually the single highest yield opportunity for early intervention. If you catch the structural integrity of a literal bridge when it is just starting to show hairline fractures, it is a manageable repair. You reinforce the steel.
Right.
But if you wait until the steel is buckling and the bridge is collapsing, you have a catastrophe that takes years to rebuild. Addressing mild depression in that 5 to 9 range is how you prevent the progression into moderate or severe chronic depression. You inherently deserve care before you reach crisis level.
It is so incredibly backward. We don't wait for a massive heart attack to start treating high blood pressure. If you go to the doctor and your blood pressure is creeping up, they don't say, well, you haven't had a stroke yet, so let's just wait and see how bad this gets.
They absolutely do not.
They intervene immediately with diet, exercise, or medication to protect your heart. So why on earth are we telling people with a PHQ-9 score of 5 to just wait until their life falls apart before taking their brain health seriously?
It is a profound systemic flaw. Early intervention dramatically improves outcomes across the board. It preserves the person's quality of life, protects their relationships from the strain of the illness,
Yeah.
and crucially, protects the physical brain from the toxic neurobiological effects of long-term stress hormones. But acknowledging this need for early intervention brings up a very practical roadblock for anyone listening.
Access to care.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
If you recognize that you are in that 5 to 9 range, or even the 10 to 14 range, how and where do you actually get that care without hitting a massive wall of 6-month wait lists and exorbitant out-of-pocket bills?
So, what does this all mean? How do we actually bridge the gap between knowing we need help and realistically getting it? This is where the notes from Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC, shift from clinical theory to incredibly practical application, because they have basically built their entire practice model around removing those exact logistical barriers.
The logistical details they have provided are quite striking when you compare them to the standard industry friction. First and foremost, CHC operates a 100% telehealth, fully HIPAA compliant practice. And their footprint is significant. They are licensed to serve all 159 counties in the state of Georgia.
Which completely changes the game. I mean, if you live in a rural county, your access to specialized mental health care is usually close to zero. You might have to drive 2 hours just to see a counselor who may not even specialize in what you're dealing with.
Exactly.
Being able to access specialized care from anywhere in the state eliminates geography as an excuse.
They have effectively erased the geographic barrier. The second barrier they address is the scope and quality of the providers. Because therapy is absolutely not one-size-fits-all, CHC has assembled a diverse, culturally competent team of over 15 licensed therapists.
Oh, wow, that is a good-sized team.
It really is. Rather than a monolithic approach, they have licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, and licensed marriage and family therapists.
And having a culturally competent, diverse team is massive. It means you are much more likely to find a provider who intimately understands your specific background.
Exactly.
They understand the nuances of your community and the unique cultural stressors you might face.
The therapeutic alliance, the actual trust between patient and provider, is universally recognized as the strongest predictor of success in therapy. To foster that, CHC offers individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, and they work with teens ages 13 and up, alongside offering life coaching.
And what really stood out in the clinical notes is that they aren't just offering generic talk therapy where you just vent for an hour. They utilize highly effective, evidence-based treatments that actually target the biological and cognitive disruptions we discussed.
Right.
We talked about CBT, but they also use ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. Rather than forcing you to aggressively fight your negative thoughts, ACT actually trains you to distance yourself from them so the thoughts don't drive the car.
They also utilize IPT, or interpersonal psychotherapy, which specifically targets the relationship patterns and social isolation that so often feed depression. And they employ behavioral activation, which is a fascinating mechanism.
Oh, how does that work?
It operates on the principle of acting from the outside in, essentially kickstarting that dead battery through structured motion and engagement, which in turn helps restart those dormant dopamine reward circuits.
Okay, that makes sense. So they are using these specific mechanisms to treat anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, grief, and chronic stress. It is a really comprehensive toolkit. But let's be real, we have to talk about time and money.
Yes, the biggest barriers for most people.
Exactly. You can have the best, most culturally competent therapists utilizing the most brilliant mechanisms in the world. But if I can't get an appointment until next year, or if it costs $300 an hour, it doesn't help the average person.
That brings us to perhaps the most crucial logistical detail in their model. At CHC, the intake process is typically completed within 3 to 5 business days.
Wait, 3 to 5 days? That is practically unheard of. If you finally make the brave decision to reach out for help on a Monday, you could realistically be sitting virtually across from a professional by Thursday.
Yes.
You aren't left languishing on a wait list while your symptoms worsen.
And regarding the financial barrier, they have structured their practice to ensure genuine accessibility. By accepting a massive range of commercial insurance, your Aetnas, Cignas, Blue Cross Blue Shields, United Healthcares, and Humanas, alongside Medicaid, which carries a $0 copay, they are effectively shattering the financial wall.
That is amazing.
Depending on the specific commercial plan, patient out-of-pocket costs generally range from $0 to $40 per session.
$0 to $40 completely dismantles the idea that elite, evidence-based mental health care is a luxury only the wealthy can afford. It makes therapy a realistic, manageable line item in a normal budget, just like a gym membership or your cell phone bill.
It democratizes access to precisely the kind of early intervention we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It allows a person to seek help when they first notice the hairline fractures, rather than waiting for the collapse.
And if you are listening to this right now and you're thinking, okay, maybe my transmission is slipping, maybe I am that smartphone running on 1% battery, but I'm still not sure if it's bad enough to actually call a therapist, CHC has set up a really brilliant stepping stone.
Yes, they have.
They offer a free private PHQ-9 screening directly on their website at cheattherapy.com, satchtherapy.com, mental health tests.
That is the exact same clinical screening tool we discussed earlier, the one with the high sensitivity and specificity for measuring those critical baseline thresholds.
Exactly the same one. It takes 5 minutes, it is totally private, and my absolute favorite part, it requires no email address to begin. You aren't signing up for a marketing newsletter, you are just getting data.
Which is huge.
Think of it like plugging an OBD scanner into your car when the check engine light comes on. There is no commitment, there is no pressure, there is no mechanic aggressively trying to sell you a repair. You are simply getting the diagnostic data you need to understand the health of your own internal engine.
It is an incredibly empowering first step. It shifts the individual from a state of vague, unquantifiable suffering into a state of objective awareness. And once you have that data, if you see you're in that 5 to 9 range or higher, you know definitively that it is time to act.
And when you are ready to act, when you are ready to talk to someone, you can call them directly at 404-832-0102 or shoot them an email at support@cheattherapy.com. Again, that website for the free screening is cheattherapy.com, mental health tests.
It is a remarkable modern model of care that directly addresses the clinical realities of depression while systematically removing the logistical friction that keeps people suffering in silence for years.
It really is. Taking a step back and reflecting on everything we've covered in this deep dive. We've waded through the muddy waters, we've broken down the biology, and we've dismantled the illusions. I think the biggest takeaway here, the thing I want you, the listener, to really absorb is that you do not have to be entirely incapacitated to be worthy of professional help.
Absolutely not.
You do not have to wait for the whole house to burn down before you call the fire department.
The illusion of high-functioning depression is just that, a dangerous illusion. Just because you have the strength to carry the weight doesn't mean it isn't slowly crushing you. The biological realities of what this condition does to the brain, the sleep architecture, and the nervous system demand that we take it seriously.
Right.
We have to intervene not just when it stops us from working, but when it stops us from living fully.
And that leaves me with this final thought, a question to just kind of mull over as you go about your day or as you drive home. If we accept the clinical reality that a person can be highly productive, checking off every single box on their to-do list, performing perfectly at work while internally drowning, What would happen if society stopped measuring mental wellness by a person's economic output or their ability to check off a to-do list? What if we stopped looking at how much a person can produce and instead started measuring wellness entirely by their internal capacity to experience joy?
Wow, that is a profound paradigm shift.
It changes everything because an x-ray can only show you what's broken on the surface, but wading into those muddy waters, that's where you actually find the way out. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.